Pack your things and sleep in the barn. Old man, my daughter shouted when I returned from Hawaii, tanned and happy. Her greedy husband stood nearby with his arms folded and added mockingly, "Your villa is now ours. Grandpa, get out of the barn." They expected me to break down and give everything away. I just smiled quietly, locked them out, and said through the glass what ruined their lives forever. Before continuing, subscribe to our new channel where we tell stories about men who take revenge on their insolent children, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. My name is Walter Stanley. I'm 68 years old and I live in South Lake Tahoe, California. Spent 35 years as an architect and interior designer before selling my firm 3 years back. Always thought I'd raised my daughter right, taught her about integrity and respect. The flight home from Hawaii on that June morning taught me how spectacularly wrong I'd been. The taxi pulled up to my lakefront house at 2847 Lakeshore Boulevard around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 2 months in paradise had done me good. My tan was solid, my camera bag was full of architectural shots from Honolulu, and I was genuinely excited to sleep in my own bed. The house looked perfect from the street, those floor-to-ceiling windows gleaming in the afternoon sun. I designed it myself 20 years ago, every angle, every beam placement, every window measured to capture the lake view just right. My daughter Daniela opened the front door before I could fish out my keys. She wasn't alone. Her husband Curtis stood behind her, arms crossed like a nightclub bouncer. Something about their postures made my architect's eye twitch. They were blocking the entrance deliberately. "Dad," Daniela said. No hug, no smile, just my title, flat as week old champagne. "We need to talk now." I set down my suitcase. "Good to see you too, sweetheart. Hawaii was wonderful. Thanks for asking." Curtis stepped forward. He's 37. Works as what he calls a business consultant, which as far as I can tell means losing other people's money in venture capital schemes. Cut the sarcasm. "Old man, we've made some decisions while you were gone." The phrase old man hit differently than it used to. A year ago, it would have been a joke between us. Today, it sounded like an inventory classification. Obsolete stock, damaged goods, decisions about my house. I kept my voice level. 35 years of client meetings taught me never to show emotion during negotiations, even when your daughter is looking at you like you're a problem to be solved about living arrangements. Daniela corrected. She'd changed since marrying Curtis. My little girl used to bite her nails when nervous. Used to call me every Sunday just to chat. That was 3 years ago. The woman standing before me now wore a designer dress that probably costs more than my monthly pension and had the emotional warmth of a tax audit. Curtis didn't bother with subtlety. "Here's the situation. Walter, Danielle and I need space. Real space. We're young. We're building a life. And frankly, this house is wasted on someone who just takes photos and walks around the lake all day. This house is wasted." I repeated slowly, "On the person who designed and built it." "You're getting defensive." Daniela's tone was pure condescension, the same voice she'd probably use with a confused senior citizen at the DMV. "We're not kicking you out. We found you a perfect solution." She gestured toward the back of the property. Through the windows, I could see the old wooden shed I'd built 15 years ago as a workshop. It was maybe 400 square feet, had basic electricity, no heating, and smelled permanently of sawdust and old paint. The barn? I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. "You want me to live in the barn?" "It's not a barn. It's a perfectly good outbuilding," Curtis snapped. "Plenty of room for one person. You've got a bed. You've got walls. What else does a guy your age need? What else does a guy my age need?" I studied his face, looking for the joke, the smile, anything indicating this was some elaborate prank. Nothing. He was dead serious. So was Daniela, my daughter, whose college education I'd paid for in full, whose wedding I'd funded, who'd called me crying a year ago because Curtis had temporarily lost his office lease. And could they please, please stay with me for just a few months until they got back on their feet? Temporary, that word doing a lot of heavy lifting. Listen, Dad. Dianela softened her voice exactly the way she used to when asking for a later curfew as a teenager. You're retired. You don't need all this space. We're trying to start a family and we need room to grow. You understand, right? I looked past them into my living room. My vintage Leica camera collection was gone from the shelf where I'd kept it for a decade. In its place sat Curtis's golf trophies. The art pieces I'd selected personally from local galleries had been replaced by generic motivational posters. Even my reading chair by the fireplace had been moved. They hadn't just lived in my house while I was gone, they'd erased me from it. And if I say no, I asked quietly. Curtis's expression went cold. Then we'll have problems, old man. See, Daniela's been doing some research. California's got these great elder care laws. If we were to suggest you're not capable of managing a property this size, not competent to handle your own affairs, he let the threat hang in the air like smoke. My hands clenched around my suitcase handle. I thought about the year I'd spent caring for Daniela when she had pneumonia at age 7, sleeping in a chair beside her hospital bed, missing project deadlines, nearly losing a major client. She'd held my hand and whispered, "You're the best dad in the world." That little girl was gone. The woman standing here now was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. Fine. The word came out before I'd fully processed what I was agreeing to. I'll move my things. Della's shoulders relaxed. She'd expected a fight. The easy victory made her generous. Take your time, Dad. You can move tomorrow. Actually, Curtis cut in. Today would be better. We've got people coming over tonight. Business associates. Would be awkward explaining why there's some old guy wandering around. Some old guy. Not Dianiela's father. Not the homeowner. Some old guy. I picked up my suitcase, walked past them without another word, down the hallway where Daniela's height marks still showed faintly on the doorframe from when she was growing up, past the kitchen where I taught her to make pancakes every Saturday morning, through the back door across the lawn to the shed. The door stuck. Hadn't opened it in months. Inside, it was exactly as bad as I'd expected. Dusty, cramped, smelling of mildew. A camping cot I'd used for a fishing trip 5 years ago leaned against the wall. One bare light bulb hung from the ceiling. Through the window, I could see my house. My beautiful house with its perfect sight lines and carefully calibrated natural lighting. I could see Curtis and Daniela through the living room windows, already rearranging furniture, celebrating their conquest. I set down my suitcase and pulled out my phone. Then I smiled, not a happy smile, something colder. Something that would have worried them if they'd been paying attention. Because here's what Curtis and Daniela didn't know. 3 months ago, I'd felt this coming, seen the way they looked at my house like wolves eyeing a lamb. I'd made a call to an attorney friend in San Francisco, started putting certain legal mechanisms in motion. They wanted the barn. They could have the barn for now because sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back immediately. It's letting your opponent think they've won while you build something they'll never see coming. I opened my camera bag and pulled out my newest Leica. Through the telephoto lens, I had a perfect view of my living room windows. Documentation. That's what my attorney had called it. Evidence of intent. The game was just beginning, and my daughter and her husband had no idea they were playing. The camping cot in the shed was murder on my back. Woke up that first morning feeling like I'd been folded into a suitcase overnight. The bare bulb had attracted moths all night, their shadows dancing across the walls like tiny accusations. Through the grimy window, I watched Curtis and Daniela having breakfast in my kitchen, coffee from my espresso machine, eggs in my Italian cookware, sitting in chairs I'd custom ordered from Denmark. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. My phone buzzed. Text from my neighbor Martha. Everything okay? Saw you going into the shed last night? I type back. Just doing some reorganizing. All good. Lying to neighbors. Another first. The list was getting long. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of humiliation and careful observation. I'd wake before dawn, photograph the sunrise over the lake out of habit, then watch my house transform into something unrecognizable. Curtis and Dianiela weren't just living there, they were performing ownership. The second night they threw a party, I counted 14 people through my telephoto lens, music thumping loud enough to rattle the shed windows, laughter carrying across the lawn like mockery. I recognized some of them as Daniela's college friends, people who used to call me Mr. Stanley with genuine respect. Now I was the crazy old man in the shed, the embarrassing family secret. Around 10 that evening, I watched a woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s, expensive jewelry, corner Dianella by the kitchen island. Through the window, I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could read body language. I'd spent decades watching people's micro-expressions during client presentations. The woman pointing around the house, Daniela gesturing expansively, pride evident in every movement. The woman's face confused, asking a question. Then I saw Daniela's mouth form the words clear as daylight, even at this distance. My father decided to live more simply. The shed suits him better. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't apologetic. She was bragging about how she'd solved the problem of an inconvenient parent. I lowered the camera and sat on the cot in darkness. This wasn't supposed to be how family worked. My mind drifted back without permission. Dianiela, at 7 years old, tugging my sleeve during a client meeting because she'd lost her favorite stuffed rabbit. I had excused myself, spent 40 minutes searching the house, found it in the dryer. Her hug had been fierce enough to crack ribs. You always fix everything. Daddy, Dianiela, at 16, crying after her first heartbreak. We'd sat on the deck overlooking the lake for 3 hours. Didn't talk much, just sat together while she processed the pain. When she'd finally gone to bed, she'd kissed my cheek and whispered, "I'm glad you're my dad." Dianiela, at 23, graduating with her marketing degree, she'd found me in the crowd, pointed directly at me, mouthed, "This is for you." When had it changed? I rewound the mental tape, looking for the inflection point. Her wedding, maybe. Curtis had swept in with his venture capital connections and tech startup vocabulary, started talking about leveraging opportunities and maximizing asset potential, started looking at me the way you'd look at an old car, still functional, but wouldn't it be nice to upgrade? Or maybe it was earlier. Maybe I'd missed the signs, been too focused on my own projects, my own photography, my own life. Maybe she'd felt neglected, and Curtis had filled that gap with promises of a better future, a future where elderly parents were problems to be managed, not people to be cherished. The party next door hit a crescendo. Someone cranked the music louder. Bass pounded through the shed walls. I could see silhouettes dancing in my living room, using my space, drinking from my glacier, celebrating on the ashes of my dignity. Something crystallized in my chest. Not anger exactly, something colder, more focused. I pulled out my phone again, started reviewing the photos I'd taken over the past 3 days. Daniela and Curtis in heated discussion, pointing at real estate documents spread across the dining table. Curtis on his laptop, windows visible over his shoulder, showing property valuation websites. The two of them measuring rooms, taking notes, planning. Planning what exactly? The attorney I'd called 3 months ago, Gerald Martinez, specialized in estate planning and trust law. Our initial conversation had been hypothetical. What if someone wanted to protect assets from potential family disputes? I'd asked. Gerald had been direct. Living trusts, irrevocable structures, legal mechanisms that remove personal ownership while maintaining control. But Walter, you'd need a reason. Courts don't look kindly on people hiding assets without cause. And if I had cause, then we'd need documentation, evidence of intent, of pressure, of coercion, proof that you're acting defensively, not offensively. I'd set up the trust in March, transferred the house into it, made myself the lifetime beneficiary with right of residence, named a charitable foundation as the ultimate heir. Gerald had witnessed every signature, recorded every conversation, documented everything with the precision of a surgeon. At the time, I'd felt paranoid. Daniela was still calling occasionally, still pretending everything was normal, but I'd seen the way Curtis looked at my house, the way he'd casually asked about my estate planning over Christmas dinner, the way Daniela had stopped asking about my health and started asking about my finances. Architect's instinct may be seeing the structural weaknesses before the building collapsed. Now sitting in the shed, watching strangers dance in my living room, that paranoia felt like prophecy. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. How's Hawaii? Get some good shots. I considered my response. Could tell him everything right now. Could trigger the next phase of the plan we'd outlined months ago. But something held me back. Not doubt, strategy. If Curtis and Daniela thought they'd won, they'd get sloppy, make mistakes, reveal their true intentions so clearly that no court in California would question my protective measures. I needed them confident, arrogant, certain of their victory, so I'd give them exactly that. Hawaii was perfect. I texted back, home now. Things are interesting. We'll call soon. Gerald's response was immediate. Standing by whenever you need. The party wound down around 2 o'clock in the morning. I watched Curtis and Daniela say goodbye to their guests, playing the perfect hosts in my perfect house. When the last car pulled away, I watched them collapse onto my leather sofa, laughing about something. They looked happy, victorious, like they'd finally gotten what they deserved. Let them think that. Let them celebrate. Let them get so comfortable in their stolen paradise that they forgot to watch their backs. Because the old man in the shed wasn't defeated. He was patient, and patience, applied correctly, was the sharpest weapon in any arsenal. I pulled out my camera one more time, focused on the house all lit up against the dark lake. My house, my design, my life's work. They could have it for now. But everything I'd built into that structure, every hidden detail, every carefully planned contingency, all of it was about to become very relevant. I smiled in the darkness of the shed. Curtis thought I was a relic. Daniela thought I was conquered. They were both about to learn that architects think in terms of foundations, and I'd built mine very, very carefully. The real construction was just beginning. 2 days after my meeting with Gerald, I drove back to Lake Tahoe with a trunk full of surveillance equipment and a notebook full of plans. The shed didn't feel quite so humiliating anymore. It felt strategic. An observation post overlooking enemy territory. I'd made a call before leaving San Francisco, found a private investigator through Gerald's firm, Helen Clark, former Sacramento PD detective, now specializing in financial investigations. Her voice on the phone had been all business. I don't do divorces or cheating spouses unless there's financial fraud involved. That your situation? Potentially, I'd said. My son-in-law might be planning to steal my house. I need to know what he's really up to. Daily rate is 800 plus expenses. I'll need a retainer of 5,000. I'd wired the money that afternoon. Now, back in my shed prison, I watched the house with different eyes. Not hurt anymore. Clinical, like I was analyzing the building's structural flaws before renovation. Curtis left every morning around 9, dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than he'd admit. Business consultant, right? I'd started keeping a log. Tuesday morning, he was gone for 3 hours, returned with shopping bags from designer stores. Wednesday, he didn't leave at all, just paced around my living room on phone calls, gesturing wildly at nothing. Thursday morning, something interesting happened. A woman arrived around 10 o'clock, professional look, mid-40s, carrying a leather portfolio. I grabbed my camera with the telephoto lens. Through the living room windows, I watched Curtis and Daniela sit down with her at my dining table. The woman spread papers across the surface. Even from this distance, I could make out the letterhead. Coldwell Banker, Real Estate. My hand tightened on the camera. Took about 40 photos over the next hour. The realtor pointing at different wall rooms. Curtis nodding eagerly. Daniela taking notes. At one point, the realtor pulled out what looked like a comparative market analysis. I could see the numbers even from here. 2.3 million, 2.5 million, 2.7 million. They were pricing my house, the one they didn't own, the one they'd never own. The realtor left around 11 o'clock. I watched Curtis and Daniela celebrate with champagne, actual champagne in the middle of the morning. They clinked glasses, kissed, looked around the house like they'd already won the lottery. Idiots, confident idiots, the most dangerous kind and also the most useful. Confident people make mistakes. That evening, Daniela brought dinner to the shed. First time she'd done that in days. Microwaved lasagna on a paper plate. She set it down on my camping cot like she was delivering meals to the homeless. Thanks, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She hesitated at the door, almost looked guilty. Almost. Dad, I've been thinking, maybe we were too harsh the other day. This transition has been hard on everyone. Trans beautiful word choice. Made it sound like a corporate restructuring instead of elder abuse. I understand, I said, took a bite of lasagna. It was cold in the middle. You and Curtis need your space. Exactly. Relief flooded her face. I'm glad you get it. Actually, Curtis and I have been talking. We want to make this easier for you. Oh, there's a really nice assisted living facility about 30 minutes from here. We looked into it. They have activities, medical care, people your age to socialize with. She pulled out a brochure from her purse. Sunset Vista, Senior Living. The photo showed elderly people playing bingo and doing watercolor paintings. I took the brochure, studied it like I was genuinely considering the option. How much does a place like this cost? Only $4,200 a month. And honestly, Dad, you'd be so much happier there. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a big property or anything. $4,200 a month, $50,400 a year. They wanted to warehouse me in an assisted living facility I didn't need. Probably pocket my pension and Social Security to help pay for it, and live in my house rent-free while planning to sell it out from under me. I looked up at my daughter, really looked at her, tried to find some trace of the little girl who used to make me Father's Day cards out of construction paper and glitter, the teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, the young woman who'd walked across the graduation stage and pointed at me in the crowd. She was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed the way I remembered. Maybe I'd been building a fantasy daughter in my head while the real one had been learning that family was just another asset to leverage. I'll think about it, I said quietly. Great. She practically bounced with relief. Just let us know. We can help you move anytime. After she left, I opened my laptop and Googled Sunset Vista Senior Living. Read the reviews. Staff is overworked and underpaid. Food is institutional at best. My father declined rapidly after moving here. 1 star, 2 stars. The occasional 5-star review that read like management had written it themselves. They wanted to put me in that place. $4,200 a month for mediocre care and slow death by boredom. I pulled out my phone, texted Helen. How's the financial investigation coming? Her response came fast. Interesting findings. Meeting tomorrow at 2 p. Coffee place on Main Street. I'll be there. The next few days were a masterclass in observation. I started noticing everything. The way Curtis checked his phone constantly, face tightening when certain numbers called, the hushed arguments between him and Daniela late at night, voices carrying across the lawn to my shed, the mail that arrived addressed to Curtis from credit card companies and collection agencies that he'd intercept before Daniela could see. One afternoon, I watched him tear up 3 separate envelopes without opening them, just ripped them to pieces and buried them in the trash. When Daniela asked what the mail was, he'd said junk without even looking at her. A liar. My daughter had married a liar, and either she didn't know or didn't care. Saturday morning, Curtis brought another man to the house. Younger guy, maybe 35, expensive watch, driving a Tesla. They stood in the driveway talking for 20 minutes. I had my recording app running on my phone, placed on the windowsill facing them. Wouldn't pick up everything, but might catch something useful. Later, I'd play it back, hear fragments of conversation. Just need him to sign 2.5 million minimum, clear about $1 million after debts. After debts. So Curtis owed money, serious money, enough that he needed to sell a house worth $2.5 million just to clear a slate. I sat in the shed that evening, adding up everything I'd observed. The real estate consultations, the assisted living facility brochures, the mysterious debts, the collection agency letters, the hushed arguments, the confident champagne celebrations. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were desperate. Curtis was drowning in debt, and my property was his life raft. Daniela was either complicit or willfully blind. Either way, she'd made her choice when she let him exile me to the shed. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. Helen says her report is ready. This is moving faster than expected. Are you prepared for next steps? I looked around the shed, at the camping cot that wrecked my back every night, at the bare light bulb, at the dusty floor and mildewed walls, at the window that gave me a perfect view of my own house, occupied by people who thought I was too old, too weak, too broken to fight back. Was I prepared? I typed back, more than ready. Let's finish this. Through the window, I could see Curtis and Dianella in the kitchen, cooking dinner with my cookware, drinking wine from my glasses, laughing about something. living their best life in my home while I sat in a shed like a discarded piece of furniture. Not for much longer. The old man in the shed was done being patient. The architect was ready to demolish some structures and rebuild something better, something just, and they wouldn't see it coming until the foundation collapsed beneath their feet. The coffee shop on Main Street was called The Grind, one of those aggressively rustic places with Edison bulbs and reclaimed wood everywhere. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and claimed a cornered table where I could watch the door. Helen Clark arrived exactly on time. I recognized her from the photo on her website, though in person, she looked tougher. Graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup. Eyes that missed nothing. She carried a manila folder thick with documents. Mr. Stanley. She shook my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. You look like a man who's been sleeping on a camping cot. That obvious? I did my homework. Your daughter and son-in-law kicked you out of your own house. They're living there, rent-free, while you're in a shed. That about cover it? Concisely. Yes. She sat down, pulled out the folder, and got straight to business. No small talk. I liked her immediately. Curtis Fowler, she began, sliding the first document across the table. Your son-in-law is a financial disaster wrapped in an expensive suit. He owes $340,000 to 3 different creditors. First creditor, Marcus Gray, a private investor, $120,000. Second, a venture capital firm called Apex Investments, $150,000. Third, personal loans from 2 different banks totaling $70,000. I studied the documents, bank statements, loan agreements, collection notices, all in Curtis's name. How'd he rack up this much debt? Failed business ventures. He's been playing venture capitalist with other people's money for 5 years. Everything he touches turns to rust. The Apex investment debt is particularly nasty. They're threatening legal action. He's got maybe 60 days before they start seizing assets. Assets he doesn't have. Exactly. Helen pulled out more papers, which brings us to the real estate angle. Your son-in-law has been in contact with 2 different realtors over the past 3 weeks. Both conversations centered on selling a property at 2847 Lakeshore Boulevard. Your address? She showed me printouts of emails. Curtis to a realtor. Need to move fast on this. Owner is elderly. We'll be transitioning to assisted living soon. Looking for quick sale, preferably cash buyer. The casualness of it hit me like a slap. Owner is elderly, like I was already dead, already erased. There's more. Helen continued. He attempted to open a home equity line of credit using your property as collateral. Applied for $150,000. The bank denied him because obviously his name isn't on the title. But the fact that he tried tells you everything about his intentions. He's planning to steal my house, sell it, and use the money to pay his debts. That's exactly what he's planning. And your daughter? Helen paused, choosing her words carefully. I don't have evidence she's actively involved in the financial scheming, but she's certainly not stopping it. What about Danielia's finances? Helen's expression darkened. That's where it gets uglier. Curtis has been using her credit. I found 4 credit cards opened in her name over the past year. Total balance, $67,000. All the statements go to a PO, box that Curtis controls. I don't think she knows about them. I sat back in my chair. My daughter wasn't just complicit, she was a victim, too. Curtis had been systematically destroying her financial future while using her as a pawn to get my house. Can you prove all this? Every document in this folder is verified. Bank records, credit reports, email correspondence, recorded phone calls with realtors. It's all admissible. She pulled out a USB drive. Copies of everything are on here. I'd suggest giving this to your attorney as soon as possible. I took the drive, held it like it was made of plutonium. This little piece of plastic contained the ammunition to destroy Curtis's plans completely. One more thing, Helen said. I've been following Curtis for the past week. Thursday afternoon, he met a woman at a restaurant in Truckee, 28 years old, works as his assistant. They were, she pulled out a photo, Curtis and a young blonde woman kissing in a parking lot. Very friendly. The affair didn't surprise me. Men who lie about money usually lie about everything else, too. But it would devastate Daniela. Maybe enough to wake her up. How long has this been going on? At least 7 months based on phone records and surveillance. Probably longer. I stared at the photo. Curtis Fowler. Business failure, debtor, liar, cheater, and my daughter had thrown away her relationship with me for this man. Thank you. Helen, send your final invoice to Gerald Martinez. He'll handle payment. Already done. She stood up, handed me her card. If you need anything else, call. I don't like men who prey on their families. Happy to help burn this one down. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, going through the folder, page by page. Every document was another nail in Curtis's coffin. Every credit card statement, every loan agreement, every email about selling my house. But I couldn't just walk into my house and wave these papers around. Curtis would deny everything. Danielle would probably defend him. I needed more than evidence. I needed the right moment, the right leverage. I needed them to expose themselves completely. That evening, I returned to the shed and found a note taped to the door. Daniela's handwriting. Dad, we need those documents signed soon. Curtis is getting anxious. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Documents. The quitclaim deed she'd tried to slip past me, disguised as tax paperwork. The legal form that would transfer my house directly to her. No money changing hands. No questions asked. Once I signed that, the house would be hers, and she'd hand it straight to Curtis to sell. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Then I texted Gerald. Need to meet tomorrow morning if possible. I have new information. His response was immediate. My office 9 a.m. I'll clear my schedule. That night, lying on the wretched camping cot, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt focused, surgical. Every piece was falling into place. The trust I'd created months ago, the evidence Helen had gathered, the documentation of Curtis's debts and lies. The question wasn't whether I could stop them. The question was how completely I wanted to destroy their plans. Through the shed window, I could see lights on in my bedroom where Curtis and Daniela now slept, where they probably discussed their schemes and counted their future profits. Let them sleep well tonight. Let them dream about their $1 million windfall and their fresh start. Because tomorrow, I'd start building the cage they'd walk into willingly. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. Bring everything Helen gave you. We're going to need it sooner than I thought. I smiled in the darkness. The game was accelerating. Curtis and Daniela thought they were closing in on victory. Thought the weak old man would crack any day now. Sign the papers. Move to the depressing assisted living facility. Disappear quietly into managed obsolescence. They'd forgotten something important about architects. We don't just build structures, we understand how they fall apart. Every weak point, every structural vulnerability, every way a building can collapse when the right pressure is applied to the right place. And I'd been studying the structure of their plan for weeks now. I knew exactly where to strike. The camping caked as I shifted position. My back ached. The shed smelled like mildew and defeat, but none of that mattered anymore because the man in the shed wasn't defeated. He was armed with information, backed by professionals, and ready to show his daughter and her husband what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. The foundation was set, the blueprints were drawn. Tomorrow construction would begin on the most satisfying project of my career, taking back what was mine and making absolutely certain they'd never forget the price of betrayal. The meeting with Gerald went exactly as expected, professional, methodical, deeply satisfying. He'd spread Helen's entire investigation across his conference table like a prosecutor building a murder case. Bank statements, credit reports, photos of Curtis with his mistress, email chains with realtors, loan applications. Every piece of Curtis's financial house of cards laid bare under fluorescent lighting. "This is airtight," Gerald said, tapping the pile of documents. "More than enough to demonstrate financial fraud, intent to defraud, and elder exploitation. We could hand this to the DA right now, but we won't. Not yet." He smiled, a lawyer's smile, sharp enough to file legal briefs with. "Let them make the next move. The more aggressive they get, the worse they look when this lands in court." I drove back to Lake Tahoe, feeling like a chess player, watching his opponent walk straight into checkmate. Curtis wanted me to sign those papers. Wanted to believe I was broken enough to surrender. Fine. Let him believe it a little longer. That belief lasted exactly 3 more days. The first sign came when I woke up in the shed and the lights wouldn't turn on. Flip the switch. Nothing. Check the breaker box mounted on the outside wall. Someone had thrown every switch to the off position. Curtis, standing on the back deck of my house, coffee mug in hand, watching me. He waved, actually waved like this was some friendly neighborly gesture instead of petty sabotage. I didn't wave back, just reset the breakers and went inside the shed, made a note in my phone. Harassment day 1, deliberately cut power to shed. Documentation, always documentation. The next morning, I discovered my car keys were missing from the shed. I'd left them on the makeshift table by the cot. Gone. Through the window. I could see my SUV still parked in the garage. But Curtis had somehow gotten in and taken my keys while I was asleep. When I walked over to ask for them back, Curtis met me at the door, didn't let me in. Problem. Walt? Nobody called me Walt. My name was Walter. Had been for 68 years. My car keys are missing. Huh? That's unfortunate. He took a sip of coffee. My coffee from my espresso machine in my kitchen. "Maybe you misplaced them. Memory goes at your age, doesn't it?" Behind him, I could see Daniela pretending not to listen, focused very intently on her phone, complicit in her silence. "Curtis, I need the keys. Tell you what, Walt, sign those papers Daniela gave you, and I'll help you look for the keys." How's that sound? I could have pushed past him, could have called the police, could have escalated right there, but that would have been playing his game. And I'd learned long ago that the person who loses their temper first usually loses everything else, too. "I'll find them myself," I said, and walked back to the shed. That afternoon, I called a locksmith, had a new key made for $200, added it to my list of expenses I'd be documenting for when this all ended up in legal proceedings. But Curtis wasn't done. He'd tasted blood, and like any bully, it made him hungry for more. The weekend arrived. Another party. Curtis seemed to throw these every few days now, filling my house with strangers, burning through my utilities, treating my property like his personal entertainment venue. This party was different, though, bigger, more people, music loud enough to rattle the shed windows from 100 feet away. I counted at least 20 cars parked along the street and in my driveway. Around 8 in the evening, someone knocked on the shed door. I opened it to find Curtis, slightly drunk, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Walt, come on up to the house. Got some people I want you to meet. I'm fine here." Curtis. Wasn't a request. Old man. His grin hardened. "You're living on this property. Least you can do is be social." He grabbed my arm. Actually, grabbed it. Started pulling me toward the house. I could have resisted, but something told me to let this play out, to see exactly how low he'd go. The party went silent when we walked in. 20 people, drinks in hand, all turning to stare at the old man being dragged in from the shed by the host. Curtis positioned me in the center of the living room like a museum exhibit. My living room, my floor, my carefully selected art that he'd removed and replaced with motivational garbage. "Everyone," Curtis announced, voice booming with artificial enthusiasm, "I want you to meet someone special. This is Walter, my father-in-law." A few polite nods, confused smiles. Nobody quite sure what was happening. "You know what makes Walter special?" Curtis continued. "He lives in our shed out back in the shed." Laughter uncertain at first, then building as people caught on that this was meant to be funny, that the old man was the punchline. "Why does he live in the shed?" you ask. Because Walter here doesn't understand that the world changes, that young people need space, that his time is over. Curtis put his arm around my shoulders, squeezing too hard. Performance affection with malice underneath. So we gave him a nice little place out back, cozy, simple, perfect for someone who doesn't need much anymore. More laughter, louder now. People were actually laughing at me in my own house, while my daughter stood in the kitchen, looking at her phone, pretending none of this was happening. "Here's the thing, Walt." Curtis's voice got harder. The smile stayed, but his eyes went cold. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., you're going to sign the papers Dianela gave you. Transfer this house over nice and legal, because if you don't, we're calling the police, reporting you for trespassing, for refusing to vacate property that doesn't belong to you anymore." The room went quiet. The joke had turned into a threat. Even the drunk guests could sense it. "You don't own this house anymore, old man." "We do. We've been living here, improving it, maintaining it. You've been sleeping in a shed like a vagrant. Any judge in California would see who the real owners are." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd married my daughter, who'd convinced her to throw away her relationship with her father, who'd racked up $340,000 in debt and thought stealing my house would solve his problems. Then I looked at Dianela, waiting for her to say something, anything, to tell her husband this had gone too far, to defend her father just once. She didn't look up from her phone. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger, something colder, more final. The last thread of hope that my daughter might remember who she used to be snapped cleanly in half. "All right," I said quietly. Curtis blinked. "What, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., I'll sign whatever you want." I looked around at the watching faces, but first I'd like to collect a few personal items from the house, things I should have taken when I moved to the shed. Is that acceptable? Curtis's grin returned wider than ever. Victory, complete victory. Sure, Walt, take whatever you want. Tomorrow, this will all be ours anyway. The party resumed. Music cranked back up. People went back to drinking and laughing. I walked back to the shed alone, Curtis's laughter following me across the lawn. In the darkness of that moldy room, I sat on the camping cot and pulled out my phone. Texted Gerald. Tomorrow morning, 9:30. I need you to meet me at the house. His response came immediately. Finally. I'll bring the whole file. This is going to be good. I looked out the window at my house. Lights blazing, music thumping, strangers celebrating in my home while my daughter pretended I didn't exist, and her husband plotted to steal everything I'd built. Tomorrow was Independence Day. How appropriate. Because tomorrow, I was declaring my independence from playing the victim, from being patient, from being the old man in the shed. Tomorrow, Curtis and Daniela would learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, when you assume silence means surrender, when you push a man so far that he has nothing left to lose. I smiled in the darkness, my first genuine smile in weeks. Let them celebrate tonight. Let them think they've won. Let Curtis drink champagne and count his future millions, because in 14 hours, I was going to pull the foundation out from under their entire scheme, and watching it collapse was going to be the most satisfying moment of my life. Independence Day. Morning arrived clear and bright, perfect weather for fireworks. The irony wasn't lost on me. I woke early, packed my few belongings from the shed into a duffel bag. Wasn't much. Some clothes, my camera equipment, toiletries, everything I'd been living with for the past 3 weeks. The camping cot could stay. Let it rot in here as evidence. Gerald arrived at 9:15, parking his Mercedes down the street rather than in my driveway. Professional distance. He carried a leather briefcase that I knew contained every document we'd need. Trust agreements, Helen's investigation files, legal notices, the complete dismantling of Curtis's plan, organized alphabetically. Ready? He asked. More than ready. We walked to the shed together, waited. At 9:28, I saw Daniela and Curtis moving around in the kitchen, through the windows, making breakfast, completely relaxed, already acting like owners. At 9:30 exactly, I knocked on the back door. Curtis opened it, looking annoyed at the early arrival, still in his bathrobe, hair messy. He'd probably been up late celebrating his imagined victory. It's not 10 yet. Walt, I know, but I'd like to discuss the transfer outside on the back deck. Just the three of us. More private. Daniela appeared behind him, already dressed. Why outside? Beautiful morning. Seems appropriate for important paperwork. I smiled my best harmless old man smile. Humor me. It's the last thing I'll ask. They exchanged glances. Curtis shrugged. What threat could I possibly pose? I was the defeated old man who'd agreed to everything. Might as well let me have my dignity. They stepped out onto the deck. I followed, positioning myself closer to the back door. Gerald stayed by the shed, far enough to be unobtrusive, but close enough to watch. So, Curtis said, pulling the quitclaim deed from his bathrobe pocket. He'd been carrying it around, probably slept with it under his pillow. Let's make this quick. Sign here, here, and here. Actually, I said, before we do that, I need to grab a few things from inside. Personal items. Won't take long. Make it fast, Curtis said, waving dismissively. I walked back toward the house. They stayed on the deck, Curtis already grinning at Daniela, probably imagining champagne celebrations later today. I stepped inside, moved quickly. Front door locked, side door locked, sliding glass door to the deck. I paused with my hand on the handle. Through the glass, I could see them. Curtis checking his phone, Daniela looking out at the lake, both of them completely unaware that their world was about to implode. I slid the door closed, locked it. The deadbolt made a satisfying click. It took Curtis about 5 seconds to notice. He turned, saw me through the glass. His expression confused at first, then annoyed. "Walt, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. Walked through the house, checking every entrance. All locked. Then I grabbed the folder I'd left in the front hallway yesterday, hidden behind a coat rack. Walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch. Curtis and Daniela had moved around the side of the house, still on the deck, but closer to the front now, watching me. Curtis's confusion shifting toward anger. Opened the door. "Old man, can't do that." "Curtis." I opened the folder, pulled out the first document. "See, we need to have a conversation, and I need to make sure you're paying attention." "What the hell is this?" He tried the sliding door. Locked. Went to a window. Locked. His face started turning red. "Open this door right now, or I'm calling the police." "Please do. I'd love to explain to them what you've been planning." I held up the first page. Trust agreement. Stanley Educational Trust. Dated from months ago. This is a living trust. You know what that is. Curtis. His face went from red to pale. Actual visible color drain. Like watching time-lapse footage of fruit rotting in reverse. You can't. I created this trust back in March. Funny timing, right? Just when you and Daniela started acting strange. Started looking at my house like it was already yours. I flipped to the next page. The house at 2847 Lakeshore Boulevard was transferred into this trust, which means legally I don't own it. The Stanley Educational Trust owns it. Daniela grabbed Curtis's arm. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying the house isn't mine to give you. Sweetheart, I'm the lifetime beneficiary. I get to live here until I die. But when I die, the property goes to a charitable foundation for architectural education. Not to you, not to anyone, to students who want to learn design." I watched their faces. Curtis's mouth had gone slack, actually hanging open like someone had disconnected his jaw muscles. His eyes kept darting between the document in my hand and the locked door behind him. Fight or flight. Response. Triggering hard. But he couldn't do either. Daniela's expression was different. Confusion first, then slow dawning horror as she understood what this meant. Her hand went to her mouth. "But the papers I gave you, the quitclaim deed, that's worthless. I can't transfer property I don't own. Even if I'd signed it, the transfer would be void. Any lawyer would spot that immediately." I smiled, which you'd know if you'd actually had a lawyer review it instead of just printing it off the internet. Curtis found. His voice came out like a strangled shout. "This is fraud. You did this to screw us over. We'll contest it. We'll prove you weren't mentally competent. Good luck with that." I pulled out another document. Medical evaluation from my doctor dated the day before I signed. The trust confirms full mental competency. There's also video footage of the signing witnessed by a notary and two independent witnesses, and a complete financial audit showing I understood exactly what I was doing. Gerald had moved closer now. Standing at the edge of the front lawn, Curtis saw him for the first time. Who the hell is that? Gerald Martinez, my attorney. He helped set up the trust. He's been documenting everything you've done for the past 3 weeks. Curtis's face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine. Anger, fear, disbelief, panic. His hands started shaking, actually trembling as he processed the magnitude of what I just told him. You've been living in my house, I continued, my voice calm as still water, rent-free without permission on property owned by a trust. That's called unlawful occupancy. Trespassing. My attorney will be filing formal complaints with the sheriff's office this afternoon. No. Daniela's voice barely a whisper. No, this can't. Dad, please. We didn't know. Didn't know. I looked at her directly. You put me in a shed. Daniela, your own father. You brought me brochures for assisted living facilities. You let your husband humiliate me in front of strangers. You knew exactly what you were doing. Curtis exploded. You senile old bastard. We'll sue you. We'll take everything. I'll destroy you. With what money? Curtis, I pulled out Helen's investigation report. I know about your $340,000 in debts. I know you've been trying to sell my house to cover them. I know you fraudulently attempted to open a home equity line using my property. I have documented evidence of all of it. The panic in his eyes intensified. He looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and desperate, and completely out of options. Here's what happens next, I said. You have until the end of the day to vacate this property. Pack your things, leave. If you're still here tomorrow, the sheriff will remove you, and I'll be pursuing legal action for fraud, attempted theft, and elder abuse. Curtis lunged at the sliding door, started pounding on it. Let me in. This is my house. Let me in right now. It's not your house. It never was. It never will be. I folded the documents back into the folder. Oh, and Curtis, about those debts. I hear Marcus Gray is getting impatient about his $120,000. Might want to deal with that before he takes legal action. His face went from red to white again. How do you... You've been spying on us. Investigating. There's a difference. When someone tries to steal your home, you're allowed to investigate their finances. I tucked the folder under my arm. Gerald will be in touch about the formal eviction process. Have a nice Independence Day. I walked back inside, closed, and locked the front door behind me. Through the front windows, I could see them. Curtis still pounding on glass. Dianiela crying, hands covering her face. Both of them locked out of the house they thought was theirs. The house that had never been theirs. The house that would never be theirs. I stood in my living room and felt the weight of 3 weeks in a shed lift off my shoulders. My house, my design, my life's work, still mine, protected by legal structures they'd never anticipated. Outside, Curtis had given up pounding, was calling someone on his phone, probably a lawyer. Let him. Any lawyer he called would tell him the same thing Gerald would tell them. The trust was bulletproof. Danella had sat down on the deck steps, head in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, the part that remembered her as a little girl, but that girl was gone. The woman on those steps had made her choices, had chosen greed over family, had chosen a liar over her father. She'd have to live with that now. I pulled out my phone, texted Gerald. It's done. They know his response. Beautiful. I'll start the formal eviction paperwork. They'll be out by end of month. I walked to the kitchen, made coffee in my espresso machine, my coffee, my machine, my kitchen, sat at my dining table, and looked out at the lake through my floor-to-ceiling windows. The fireworks tonight would be spectacular, but nothing compared to the explosion I'd just detonated in Curtis and Daniela's carefully constructed fantasy. They'd wanted my house. They'd schemed for it, manipulated for it, humiliated me for it, and now they'd never have it. Justice had a beautiful architecture. Curtis didn't waste time. The day after I locked them out and revealed the trust, he was already hunting for ammunition to fight back. I learned this the following morning when Gerald called. We've got movement on their end. Curtis hired Bruce Peterson. He's a local attorney who specializes in elder law and trust disputes. Any good? Good enough to be expensive. Bad enough to take a case he can't win. Gerald's tone carried amusement. Peterson filed a motion to contest the trust. Claims you created it under duress or while mentally incompetent. Standard playbook when someone wants to break a trust. How worried should I be? On a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 2. We documented everything perfectly, but we'll need to respond formally. That response came 5 days later. Gerald scheduled a meeting at Peterson's office in South Lake Tahoe. Professional courtesy between attorneys, but also an opportunity to end this quickly before it dragged into expensive litigation. I arrived at Peterson's office with Gerald, carrying a leather folder thick with documentation. The receptionist led us to a conference room where Curtis and Daniela already sat with their attorney. Bruce Peterson was older than I expected. Mid-60s, gray hair, expensive suit that had probably looked sharp 20 years ago. He stood and shook hands with professional neutrality, but I caught the assessment in his eyes, sizing me up, looking for signs of the incompetent elder his clients claimed I was. Mr. Stanley. He began once we'd all sat down. My clients have serious concerns about the trust you created. They believe you were pressured into this decision, possibly by outside parties looking to exploit your vulnerability. Interesting theory, I said. Which outside parties would those be? Perhaps your attorney? Peterson nodded toward Gerald, someone who stood to benefit from legal fees. Gerald smiled, the kind of smile that meant someone had just made a tactical error. Mr. Stanley paid me a flat fee for the trust creation, $5,000. That's well below market rate for this type of work, and I have no ongoing financial interest in the trust's existence. Would you like to see the billing records? Peterson's jaw tightened slightly. Nevertheless, my clients report that Mr. Stanley showed signs of confusion and memory loss in the months before creating this trust. Really? I leaned forward. What signs would those be exactly? Curtis spoke for the first time. You forgot conversations we had, repeated yourself, got confused about dates. I'm 68, not 98. Everyone forgets conversations occasionally. I pulled a document from my folder. This is a comprehensive medical evaluation from my physician, conducted the day before I signed the trust documents. Cognitive function tests, memory assessments, psychiatric evaluation. Everything came back normal. I can give you his contact information if you'd like to verify. I slid the document across the table. Peterson read it, his expression souring with each paragraph. There's also this. Gerald set up a laptop on the conference table, queued up a video file, complete recording of the trust signing. Mr. Stanley, myself, a notary, and 2 independent witnesses. Watch the whole thing if you'd like. 42 minutes of Mr. Stanley clearly articulating his wishes, answering questions about the trust structure, and demonstrating complete understanding of what he was creating. The video played. There I was 3 months ago, sitting in Gerald's office, explaining in clear, coherent detail why I wanted to create an educational trust, discussing the tax implications, making jokes with the witnesses, looking absolutely nothing like someone under duress or suffering from dementia. Danella's face crumpled as she watched. She'd convinced herself. Maybe that I'd been manipulated, that this wasn't really my choice. The video destroyed that fantasy. Peterson stopped the playback after 10 minutes. He'd seen enough. Mr. Stanley, he said, his tone shifting from aggressive to conciliatory. Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. You could amend the trust to include your daughter as a beneficiary. Give her the house after your passing. That would address everyone's concerns. No. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I created this trust specifically to prevent the house from going to people who would sell it for profit. The entire point was to ensure it benefits students of architecture, not my daughter and her husband. I leaned back in my chair. Besides, there's a more immediate issue we need to discuss. Gerald pulled out another document. Notice to quit filed with the El Dorado County Sheriff's Office this morning. Your clients have been residing unlawfully in property owned by the Stanley Educational Trust. They have 30 days to vacate. Curtis exploded out of his chair. This is insane. We've been living there for a year. You can't just throw us out. Actually, I can. My voice stayed calm. You were guests in my home. I revoked that invitation when you tried to steal the property. Now you're trespasser. The law is quite clear on this. We have rights. Curtis was shouting now, face red, veins visible in his neck. Tenant rights. You have to go through proper eviction procedures. Which we are doing, Gerald said smoothly. The notice to quit is the first step. If you're not gone in 30 days, we'll file for formal eviction, but I'd recommend leaving voluntarily. Evictions show up on background checks. Makes it very difficult to rent in the future. Peterson put a hand on Curtis's arm, trying to calm him. But Curtis was beyond reason now, all his plans collapsing, his escape from debt vanishing, the $1 million windfall he'd been counting on turning to smoke. I'll destroy you, he hissed at me. I'll tell everyone you're a senile old man who abandoned his family. I'll ruin your reputation. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of father you are. I'd been waiting for this. Pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, scrolled to a specific recording, hit play. Curtis's voice filled the room, tiny but clear, through the phone speaker. After the old man signs the documents, we'll flip this place for $2.5 million, pay off the debts, clear about $1 million profit. His face went white. Then another voice on the recording, the business partner he'd brought to tour the house. What if he doesn't sign? Curtis again. He'll sign. He's got no choice. Where's a 68-year-old man with no money going to go? I stopped the playback. I have about 40 minutes of recordings. You plan in your scheme, discussing how to manipulate me, talking about selling my house like it was already yours. Want to go to the media with this? I'm happy to provide full documentation of your attempted fraud. The silence in the room was profound. Curtis looked like he'd been flash frozen. Daniela was crying quietly, one hand over her mouth. Peterson closed his laptop with a decisive click. I think we're done here. Mr. Fowler, Mrs. Stanley. I'd recommend you comply with the notice to quit. Contesting this further would be inadvisable. That's it. Curtis's voice cracked. You're giving up. I'm paying you to fight this. I'm paid to provide legal counsel, not to pursue unwinnable cases. Peterson stood up, clearly ready to end the meeting. The trust is legitimate. The documentation is bulletproof. And frankly, your recorded statements about defrauding Mr. Stanley make you extremely unsympathetic clients. My advice is to vacate the property and consider yourself fortunate he's not pursuing criminal charges. Gerald and I stood meeting over. Game, set, match. As we walked out, I heard Curtis behind us, still raging at Peterson. Danella sat silent, staring at the table, her world in pieces. Outside in the parking lot, Gerald clapped me on the shoulder. That went better than I expected. Peterson's smart enough to know when he's beat. They'll be out in 30 days. I'd bet on it. Curtis is desperate, but he's not stupid enough to ignore a legal eviction notice. Gerald paused. There is one thing, though. Helen Clark called me this morning. She finished her full investigation into Curtis's finances. The report is extensive. How extensive? 340,000 in debts wasn't the full story. There's more. Fraudulent credit cards, hidden accounts, and he hesitated. Personal complications. Show me. We drove to a coffee shop. Gerald handed me a USB drive. Everything's on here. You might want to share some of this with Daniela separately from Curtis. She deserves to know what she's really married to. That evening, I sat in my reclaimed living room, reviewing Helen's complete report on my laptop. Every page made Curtis look worse. The man was a financial catastrophe wrapped in designer suits. But the final section was what made me pause. Photographs. Curtis with a young woman. Different occasions. Different locations. Intimate moments. Not business meetings. Helen's notes identified her. Jessica Vance, 28, Curtis's executive assistant. Relationship ongoing for at least 7 months based on surveillance and phone records. I stared at the photos for a long time. My daughter had thrown away our relationship for a man who was cheating on her, drowning in debt, and planning to steal from her father. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. But Daniela deserved to know the truth, not as revenge, as information. What she did with it was her choice. I picked up my phone and texted her. Coffee tomorrow, just the two of us. There are things you need to know. Her response took 10 minutes. Okay, 10 a.m., at the grind. See you there. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow would be difficult for both of us, but necessary. Some truths hurt, but they're still better than lies. Danella arrived at the coffee shop 5 minutes late, looking like she hadn't slept, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing sweatpants and a jacket. The polished woman from previous weeks was gone. This was someone coming apart. She sat down across from me without ordering anything, hands clasped on the table, knuckles white. Dad, Let me talk first. I pulled out my tablet already loaded with Helen's report. I hired a private investigator a few weeks ago to look into Curtis's finances. What she found, you need to see it. I don't want to. Daniela, I kept my voice firm. You need to see this. Not because I want to hurt you, because you deserve to know the truth about the man you married. I turned the tablet toward her, started with the financial summary. Curtis's debts laid out in brutal detail. 340,000 owed to 3 creditors, collection notices, threatened lawsuits, bank accounts in the red. I knew he had some debt. Daniela said weakly. Business loans, investments that hadn't paid off yet. Keep reading. The next section showed the credit cards. 4 different cards opened in Daniela's name over the past 18 months. Total balance, $67,000. Applications submitted with her personal information. Statements sent to a P.O. box. Curtis controlled. Daniela's hands started shaking. No, I didn't. I never opened these cards. Curtis did using your credit, your social security number, your signature forged. I scrolled to copies of the applications. Even I could see the signatures didn't match her handwriting. But that's fraud. That's identity theft. Yes, I let that sink in. Your credit is destroyed. You're on the hook for $67,000 in debt you didn't authorize. Curtis has been systematically ruining your financial future to cover his own mistakes. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I wanted to comfort her, but we weren't done yet. There's more, I said quietly. I scrolled to the final section, the photographs. Curtis and Jessica at a restaurant. Curtis and Jessica at a hotel. Curtis and Jessica kissing in a parking lot. Date stamped on each image going back 7 months. Daniela stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had reached into her chest and ripped out something vital. Her name is Jessica Vance, I said, his assistant. The relationship has been ongoing since at least January, based on the investigators' findings. Probably longer. Daniela's voice came out broken. I asked him about her once. He said she was just an employee, that I was being paranoid. He lied about this, about the credit cards, about the debts, about everything. I closed the tablet. This is who you chose over your father. A liar, a cheat, a man who was planning to sell my house out from under me to cover debts I didn't know existed. The tears came harder now, her whole body shaking with sobs. People at nearby tables glanced over, then looked away, embarrassed. I didn't know. She gasped between sobs. Dad, I swear I didn't know about any of this. You knew enough. My voice stayed hard. Had to stay hard or I'd crack. 2. You knew he wanted my house. You knew he was pressuring me to sign it over. You stood by while he put me in a shed. You brought me brochures for assisted living facilities. You let him humiliate me in front of guests. He said you agreed to it. He said you understood we needed the space. And you believed him. Your father, who raised you alone after your mother left, who paid for your education, who was there for every milestone in your life. You believed I'd just happily move into a shed? She had no answer, just sat there crying, the weight of her choices crushing down. I pulled out another document, printout of the credit card statements with her name on them. You need to file a police report. Identity theft. Fraud. These cards aren't your responsibility if you report them. I can't. That would mean Curtis goes to jail. Curtis is already facing legal consequences. The investors he owes money to aren't as forgiving as I am. Marcus Gray alone is threatening a lawsuit for $120,000. Curtis's life is collapsing whether you report the fraud or not. Daniela took the papers with trembling hands. What am I supposed to do? That's up to you. But here's what I know. In 8 days, the 30-day eviction notice expires. You and Curtis need to be out of my house. Where you go after that, who you stay with, whether you stay married to him, those are your decisions to make. I don't have anywhere to go. My apartment, I gave it up when we moved in with you. Your friend Rachel still lives in Sacramento, doesn't she? The one from college? Yes, but we haven't talked in months. Maybe it's time to rebuild some bridges you burned. I stood up. You're my daughter. I'll always love you. But trust, respect, a relationship, those have to be earned back. And right now you're married to a man who destroyed your credit, cheated on you, and tried to steal from your father. Until you deal with that reality, we don't have much to talk about. I left her sitting there staring at the documents, her coffee untouched and cold. Walking back to my car, I didn't feel victorious, just tired and sad. The little girl who used to make me Father's Day cards was gone. In her place was a woman who'd made terrible choices and was finally being forced to face the consequences. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. Curtis's lawyer called. They're asking about a settlement. Want to negotiate timeline for moving out? I type back. No settlement. No negotiation. 30 days or sheriff's deputies remove them. The response: understood. I'll inform Peterson. That evening, I was sitting on my deck, photographing the sunset over Lake Tahoe, when I heard shouting from the driveway. Curtis and Daniela, visible through the side gate, their voices carrying across the property. You went to see him after everything he's done to us. Curtis's voice sharp with anger. Everything he's done. Curtis, I saw the credit cards. 4 cards I never opened. $67,000 in my name. Those were for us, for our future. I was going to pay them off when we sold the house with money you were stealing from my father. It wasn't stealing. It was going to be ours eventually anyway. It was never going to be ours. He created that trust months before we even asked him to sign anything. He knew what you were planning. Silence. Then Curtis, quieter but venomous. This is his fault. That senile old bastard poisoned you against me. He showed me photographs. Curtis, of you and Jessica. 7 months. You've been cheating on me for 7 months while planning to steal my father's house. More silence. Longer this time. Jess means nothing. It's just stress relief. You and I were the real thing. The sound of a slap echoed across the property, sharp and clear. Pack your things, Dianiela said, voice shaking. Sleep somewhere else tonight. I can't look at you right now, babe. Come on, get out. I heard a car door slam, engine start, tires on gravel. Curtis leaving, then quiet. Just the sound of the lake lapping at the shore, and Daniela crying somewhere in the driveway. I couldn't see. Part of me wanted to go to her to comfort her like I did when she was young, and the world seemed cruel. But she'd made her bed. She'd chosen Curtis over me, chosen greed over family, chosen lies over truth. Now she had to lie in that bed, at least until she proved she could make better choices. My phone buzzed again. Helen Clark heard through channels that Curtis's creditors are accelerating. Marcus Gray filed suit this afternoon. Curtis is about to have a very bad month. I looked out at the lake. The sun had fully set now, leaving just purple and orange streaks across the sky. Beautiful, peaceful, mine. In 30 days, Curtis and Dianiela would be gone. My house would be truly mine again. And whatever happened to them after that was their problem, not mine. Sometimes justice feels good. Sometimes it just feels necessary. Tonight, it felt like both. 5 days before the eviction deadline, Curtis made one final mistake. He decided to throw a party. Not just any party. A farewell gathering, he called it. According to the invitation I saw accidentally when the mail carrier mixed up our deliveries, inviting his business contacts, investors, networking connections. One last attempt to maintain the facade of success before his world completely collapsed. The irony was delicious. He was throwing a party in my house, which he'd have to vacate in less than a week, while pretending everything was fine. Like a captain hosting cocktails on the Titanic after hitting the iceberg. I called Gerald. Curtis is having a party this Saturday. Big one by the looks of it. And you want to crash it with your help. And Helen's. I think it's time Curtis's business associates learned exactly who they've been dealing with. Walter, are you sure? This could get ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just bringing the ugliness into the light. I paused. These people have a right to know who they're investing with. Consider it a public service. Saturday arrived warm and clear. Perfect weather for outdoor entertaining. Curtis had set up tables on the deck, hired a bartender, laid out catering, all paid for with money he didn't have, I assumed, or maybe with credit cards in Dianiela's name that she didn't know about. I watched from inside the house as guests arrived. Expensive cars, designer clothes, the Lake Tahoe elite. Curtis worked the crowd like a politician, all smiles and handshakes and confident laughter. Daniela stood beside him, playing her role, though I could see the strain in her smile from here. At 7:30, I called Gerald and Helen. Time to make an entrance. We arrived together. Gerald in his lawyer suit, Helen carrying her investigation folder. Me in casual clothes that made it clear I owned the place. The bartender recognized me, confusion crossing his face, but Curtis was too busy holding court to notice our arrival immediately. Helen moved first, walked straight to the center of the deck, positioned herself where everyone could see her, and cleared her throat loudly. "Excuse me, everyone. My name is Helen Clark. I'm a private investigator, and I have some information about your host that you should hear." The conversation died instantly. 20-some faces turned toward her. Curtis's smile froze, then cracked. His eyes found me standing at the edge of the deck. An understanding dawned like a sunrise. "You can't." He started. "I can." Helen interrupted. "Everything I'm about to say is documented fact, available in public records or verified through legal investigation. Mr. Curtis Fowler owes $340,000 to various creditors. Marcus Gray, I believe you're here. Curtis owes you $120,000 payment, 6 months overdue." A man in his 50s, distinguished looking, stood up from one of the tables. Marcus Gray, his face had gone red. "Curtis, you said you'd have my money last month, then the month before. You've been stalling for half a year." "Marcus, this isn't the time." Curtis tried. "When is the time? When you've run off with my investment." Marcus's voice got louder. "I want my money now, or I'm filing suit Monday morning." Helen continued merciless. "Mr. Fowler has also been using his wife's identity to open fraudulent credit card accounts. 4 cards totaling $67,000 in debt, all without her knowledge or consent." Gasp from the crowd, people looking at Daniela, who'd gone pale, staring at the deck floor. "Additionally," Helen said, pulling out photographs, "Mr. Fowler has been engaged in an extramarital affair for the past 7 months with Jessica Vance, his executive assistant. I have documentation of multiple hotel stays, restaurant meetings, and other encounters." She held up the photos. Curtis and Jessica, clearly intimate. Several guests actually stood up to get a better look. The crowd's mood shifted from curious to hostile. Nobody likes a liar, especially not investors who've trusted him with their money. Curtis was trying to speak, words tumbling out incoherently. You can't. This is slander. I'll sue you for defamation." "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," Gerald said smoothly, stepping forward. "Everything Ms. Clark stated is documented and verifiable. I am Gerald Martinez, Mr. Stanley's attorney, the gentleman you've been living with for the past year, the gentleman whose house you're currently standing in." That got everyone's attention. Curtis claimed he owned this property. Gerald continued. "He's been telling people he was the owner, but in fact, this house belongs to a living trust created by Walter Stanley, who is the lifetime beneficiary. Curtis has no ownership stake whatsoever. He's been living here as a guest. A guest who's now been legally evicted and has 5 days to vacate the premises." The crowd turned to look at me. I gave a small wave. "Hi, I'm Walter Stanley. I own this house. Built it myself 20 years ago. Curtis and my daughter have been living here rent-free while plotting to steal the property and sell it to cover his debts. They even tried to put me in the shed out back so they could have more space." Dead silence. Then someone laughed, nervous, Disbelieving laughter. Then more people joined in, but not with Curtis. At him. You've been telling everyone you owned a lakefront mansion, a woman in pearl said, voice dripping with contempt. You showed us your property like you were some real estate mogul. It was never yours. It's complicated, Curtis stammered. No, it's simple, Marcus said, standing up. You're a fraud, a liar, and I want my money back. Or I'm taking you to court for every penny you have left. I don't have it, Curtis shouted. Finally, the truth. His composure shattered completely. I don't have your money. I invested it and it failed. Everything failed. I'm drowning in debt and I needed this house to save me. The admission hung in the air like toxic gas. Several guests were already gathering their things, heading for the exits. Nobody wants to be associated with a sinking ship. Daniela stood up, walked to the center of the deck. Her voice came out clear and cold. I'm filing for divorce, she announced to the assembled crowd. Curtis committed identity theft, fraud, and adultery. I knew nothing about his schemes. I was as much a victim as anyone else here. Curtis reached for her. Babe, please. She jerked away. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. As of this moment, we're done, completely done. The party dissolved rapidly, guests leaving, some offering sympathetic looks to Daniela, most just wanting to escape the drama. Marcus Gray stopped on his way out, handed Curtis a business card. My lawyer's contact. Expect to hear from him Monday. This isn't over. Within 20 minutes. The deck was empty except for Curtis, Daniela, Gerald, Helen, and me. The hired bartender and catering staff had packed up and fled. Abandoned glasses and half-eaten appetizers littered the tables like debris after a hurricane. Curtis sat in one of the chairs, head in his hands. Broken. Everything he'd tried to build, every lie he'd told, every scheme he'd planned, all of it collapsed in less than 30 minutes. 5 days. I said quietly, then you're out. If you're not gone, the sheriff will remove you. Take whatever furniture is yours. Leave everything else. I walked back into my house, my home, my sanctuary that I'd almost lost to a con man and my own daughter's greed. Behind me, I heard Daniela crying, Curtis trying to explain, to apologize, to salvage something from the wreckage. Her telling him to shut up, that she never wanted to see him again, that he destroyed everything. Justice. I'd learned. Doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it just feels like the world finally balancing its scales. The day they moved out, I stayed away, didn't want to watch, didn't need the closure. Gerald texted me updates throughout the morning. Curtis loaded his belongings into a moving truck bound for a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. Daniela filled her car with boxes, drove off toward Sacramento without looking back. By noon, they were gone. The house stood empty, except for my furniture, my belongings, everything they'd temporarily displaced. I came home that evening to silence. Beautiful, peaceful silence. Walked through each room, reclaiming the space. Moved my camera collection back to its proper shelf. Hung my art back on the walls. Restored my reading chair to its spot by the fireplace. The shed out back I left exactly as it was. Kept the camping cot, the bare bulb, the mildewed smell. A reminder. Sometimes you need to remember how low you've been to appreciate how far you've climbed back. The following weeks passed in a strange sort of calm. Gerald handled the remaining legal details. The trust remained intact. Marcus Gay's lawsuit against Curtis moved forward. Daniela filed for divorce and reported the credit card fraud to authorities. I spent my days photographing the lake, reading architecture journals, existing in the space I'd fought so hard to keep. The house felt bigger without them, emptier, but in a good way. Room to breathe again. Then, in early autumn, I made a decision. The trust wasn't just a defensive measure anymore. It was an opportunity, a way to turn something ugly into something meaningful. I contacted the Lake Tahoe Community Center and proposed a monthly seminar series, Principles of Architectural Design, learning from a practitioner, free sessions open to students, recent graduates, anyone interested in architecture as craft rather than just career. The first session drew 12 people, young architects mostly hungry for knowledge that didn't come from textbooks. I talked about sightlines and natural light, about designing buildings that complemented their environment rather than dominating it, about the difference between constructing a structure and creating a home. One kid, maybe 25, asked the exact right question. How do you know when a design is finished? When removing anything else would make it worse? I answered, architecture is about elimination as much as addition, knowing what not to include. After the session, 3 students stayed to ask more questions. We talked for 2 hours about cantilevers and load-bearing walls and the poetry of functional space. It felt good, purposeful, like I was building something again, just with words and ideas instead of blueprints and materials. I also set up a scholarship fund, $50,000 initially, enough to support 5 students annually with $10,000 grants, the Stanley Educational Architecture Fund. My money going to people who actually cared about the craft, not to a son-in-law who saw it as a piggy bank to raid. The letter from Daniela arrived mid-September, handwritten, 3 pages, no excuses, just acknowledgement and apology. She'd started therapy, found work as a graphic designer, was rebuilding her credit slowly, disputing the fraudulent accounts one by one. I don't expect forgiveness. She wrote, I don't deserve it. I chose greed over family. I chose a liar over my father. I let Curtis convince me that you were the problem when the problem was us was me. She didn't ask for anything, didn't request money or reconciliation or even a response. Just laid out her truth and left it there. I read the letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer. Didn't answer immediately. Maybe someday, when she'd proven through actions rather than words that she'd actually changed. We could rebuild something, but not yet. Some bridges, once burned, take years to reconstruct. Late September brought the first cold snap. Early morning frost on the deck, steam rising off the lake. I stood outside with my newest Leica, capturing the moment when sunlight first hit the water, the way the light fractured into 1,000 tiny stars across the surface through the viewfinder. Everything looked clean, precise, exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed. Text from Gerald. Marcus won his judgment. Curtis owes $127,000 with interest and court costs. He'll be paying that off for the next decade. I type back. Good. Maybe he'll learn something. Though honestly, I doubted it. Some people never learn, never take responsibility, never understand that consequences aren't punishments. They're just math. Actions plus time equals results. Curtis would probably spend the next 10 years blaming me for his problems, telling people the crazy old man who ruined his life, missing the part where he ruined it himself through lies, theft, and greed. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I lowered the camera and just looked at the lake, really looked at it, the way the wind created patterns on the surface, the way the trees reflected in the shallows near shore, the sheer improbable beauty of this place I got to call home, my house, my design, my life's work, still standing, still mine, protected by legal structures that would outlast me, ensuring it served a purpose beyond my lifetime. The scholarship students would benefit from this place, would learn that good architecture isn't about ego or profit. It's about creating spaces where people can live fully, beautifully, authentically. That's what I tried to teach Daniela when she was young. That success isn't measured in dollars or square footage. It's measured in integrity, in relationships, in the legacy you leave behind. She'd forgotten that lesson. Maybe someday she'd remember. Until then, I had seminars to plan, photographs to take, sunsets to capture, a life to live on my own terms, in my own space, free from manipulation and greed. The camping cot in the shed remained empty, would stay empty, a memorial to 3 weeks of humiliation that taught me something valuable. Patience isn't weakness, strategic thinking isn't surrender, and sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be the victim someone needs you to be. I raised the camera again, clicked the shutter, perfect exposure, perfect composition, perfect moment. Justice, I'd learned, has excellent architecture. You just have to be patient enough to see the design completed. And standing here in my home, watching the sun rise over Lake Tahoe, I finally understood what completion looked like. It looked like freedom. It looked like peace. It looked like a 68-year-old man who'd fought for what was his and won, not through violence, not through cruelty, just through preparation, documentation, and the patient application of legal consequence. The old man in the shed had become the architect of his own justice, and the view from here was absolutely beautiful. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel and listen to a few stories there. You can find the link to it in the collaboration or description of this video or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us, because this channel may soon cease to exist. Put it on there.